Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
With Beetlejuice 2 coming out this month, I really wanted to make a Beetlejuice cake. It seemed like such a fun idea, and I've not made a face cake for a while. I don't actually think I've made a face cake for YouTube. So I thought this would be a fun one. It turned out to be quite an artsy one, lots of dusting, and I really enjoyed it, lots of colour in this one. So I'm going to show you how I made it, and I'm going to show you how I used my edible dust to get all the light and shadow and bring the whole cake to life. And I'm also going to tell you how I got this really cool glow in the dark vibe going on. It's really Halloweeny, I really love it, and I'm going to tell you all about it. Okay, so I had 8-inch round cakes to use for this, so I sized my template to be 8 inches wide, and then proportionately the length is a little bit longer, so I needed more than one layer of cake to put them together, so we just got a little bit at the bottom for the chin. So I'm going to layer them up, put them together, and I will put a layer of buttercream and jam in between both layers. And I'm just really speeding through this part because I want to get to the good stuff. Once I've got the filling in place and it's all secure, I will put the top layer of cake. And that's pretty much it for building the cake. I'm just going to start sculpting it now. So this is just the head. So I've cut around, as I said earlier, cut around the head, and now I've decided that to get the shape of the head correct, I want to cut the hair away. So I've done that, so I'm left with a little bit of Beetlejuice, and I will line up the template with the bottom of the chin. And then I'm just cutting around the outside of his head, and then I'm going to trim away the edges where his hair would be on the cake that I've got left. So I'm not taking away the cake completely, I'm just making it sit lower down than the top part of the cake, which will be the face. So basically what I'm making it do is pushing the hair back so that his face sits further up, if that makes sense. And then I'm using the template again to mark where his eyes are going to be, and then I'm going to cut around the eyes on the image, and I'll use that to cut the correct shape for the eyes on the cake as well. So I've got this really creepy image now, and I'm cutting around the shape to mark out the eyes, and I'll take that piece away so that those sit deep in the face the way the eyes normally do. Then I faffed about a bit and added a little piece of cake to be his nose, which I think I might even have took the whole thing off later because I didn't like it, and just used ganache, but hey ho, we'll go with it for now. So now I've got some more cake, just offcuts of the 8-inch rounds that I had earlier, and I'm just piecing them in to be his shoulders. And then same as earlier, I'm just going to add another layer of buttercream on the shoulder area, and then another layer of cake cut in the same shape as his shoulders. And then thinking about the 3D element of it again, I wanted the part of the shoulder to be further back, so lower down than the piece of cake that's going to be his chin, because obviously if you want it to look a bit more realistic and 3D, then it can't all be one level. So once I've cut out all the shapes and I've got in there a little bit for his collar and his shirt, I covered the whole thing in white chocolate ganache. This white chocolate ganache is not my best work, it's very lumpy. I'm not really sure what I did wrong this time, but I just needed to get it on the cake, let it cool down and set a bit, and then it was much easier to work with. As you can see, it's so much smoother now that it's cooled down, and I've been able to smooth it out a bit with my hands. I'm using a metal modelling tool here, and I'm just sort of scraping off some bits to smooth it off and put some shapes a bit more where I wanted them. As I said earlier, I did mess about a lot with the nose before I decided to just take it off completely and just have it made purely of ganache. So I'm just sculpting out the features of the face using ganache. I've got soft ganache for this, and I'm just getting the general shape, and then once it cools in the fridge or on the work surface, I can perfect it a little bit more. So I'll set the eyes further back, I'll make the forehead proud, the chin proud, and I'm going to put in a top lip but not a bottom lip because the lip is actually covered by this big ticket that Beetlejuice is holding. I'm just adding a little bit of a really soft modelling chocolate that I sometimes use, especially on faces, and I'm just going to put it in the middle of the forehead so that it sits more proud, and then I'll round it off and make it a little bit more flat towards the edges. And I'll add an indentation more than halfway down the forehead to define the brow. And you can see that definition a little bit more from the side. So after this, I did a lot of smoothing and perfecting. I don't think you need to see all of that, but what you do need to see is just how I fold my template in half and use that on the cake again and again to make sure you get all the proportions right. So I cut the eyes out of the template, and then I'm just going to use my modelling tool to draw the shape of the eyes with the template onto the cake. So for the eyes, I've just took some white modelling paste. I've basically sort of rolled it into a ball and then cut it in half, so I've got like a sort of rounded oval shape now. And the roundedness of it makes it look a little bit more lifelike as opposed to it being more flat. So I'm just putting them in place, and then I'll leave them to set while I cover the rest of the cake. So once I've got a head and a face, I need to put the skin on. So I've got some fondant here that I've coloured to make it like a really, really light flesh tone, but it needs to be really light because I'm going to paint over it white. So I didn't want it to be white and then be painted white. I wanted it to look as sort of realistic as the picture that I've got. So it's sort of like face paint. That's what it looks like to me that he's wearing. So I'm going to use cocoa butter for that, and that gives it the texture of having this sort of white creamy makeup added over the top of it. But we'll get to that. For now, let's just cut out where the eyes are and have them look like Michael Myers. Okay, so here's some relevant versus non-relevant information for you. So I've covered the whole cake and smoothed over all the features relevant, and then I've left some stuff on the board and I created hairlines all over that stuff. That is completely irrelevant because I ended up not liking it and cutting it off later on in the video. But I do have to tell you that I've done this because you'll see it in the background for quite some time. So I'm putting in some lines on his brow there so that he's got some sort of furrowed brow lines. I'm smoothing down the paste so that it looks like eyelids above his eyeballs, and then I'm adding in some sort of wrinkles on his forehead, and I'll just sort of smooth all round the face and just add in as much detail as I can see in the photo in front of me. So when I was happy reasonably with the indentations on the face, I marked out the ear, and I've smoothed upwards with my Dresden tool there to make a sort of indentation that would be the top lip. I'm not going to create a full mouth because it's going to be covered. You can see that image on the left of the screen here. His mouth is totally covered with this big ticket that he's holding, so there's no point in making a full face that's then going to be covered. The image that I'm copying, his face is sort of turned to the one side, it's not face on, so that was a bit of a challenge for recreating it because for quite a while the cake face just looked a lot wider than the original image, so I had to work on that a little bit, but we'll see that as we come to the end. So using my little circle cutters for the templates for the eyes, you just use them to lightly press into the modelling paste from earlier and then paint them with my edible dusts and pens, black for the pupil, and I used fractal green for the outline of the eye and then moss green, and just mix them up for just to get a more realistic eye. If you want to make an eye look a lot more realistic, a really good tip is once you've got an outline for the iris and an outline for the pupil, you can use your eye colour and just paint in really fine lines from the outside towards the pupil, and just do that repeatedly in lines all the way around your eye. And then if you go back with different colours, like different shades of the same colour, so like darker greens, lighter greens, and just do that repeatedly, it can look really realistic. I've added some more paste on the brow and the sort of bag of the eye on this one, just to make it look more furrowed and make his sort of eye bag stand out a lot more. In hindsight, by the time I'm finished, I think I've added far too much paste around the eyes because the eyeballs themselves look really, really sunken deep in the face. But I was fine for what I was doing. This one was just for fun, just for me. So what I found was I was really happy with the eyeballs themselves. I thought the eyes looked really realistic, but they were definitely very deep into the face. So I'm moving on now to covering the clothes part of the cake. So I've got some white paste and I'm covering the part that will be his shirt collar. And then I've mixed up a sort of purpley colour for the jacket. It's definitely too light, but the plan was always to go over that with a burgundy coloured dust, and that really deepens the colour of the jacket, but it also gives it a more textured look. So by the time that I'd finished dusting it, I thought it looked a little bit velvety, which was nice. So the shoulders are covered with the jacket colour, and now I'm just adding the lapels and some little creases with my Dresden tool in the shirt collar, which I will then go back and add some shadow to later. And then I'm going back and working on the eyes yet again, because I am a perfectionist and I cannot leave anything alone. So now comes the sort of arty fun part. I've decided I wanted to use cocoa butter for this one. So still completely edible, like my dusts and dipping solution mix that I usually use to paint things, but this, I feel this adds more of a texture, so I thought it would make it look more like that white face paint look that Beetlejuice has. So what you need to do is just melt the cocoa butter and then mix in your edible dust colour, and you've got this paint that you can use. I like to have an oil burner that I use just for the cocoa butter, because you need to keep the cocoa butter melted. If you just melt it in the microwave, for example, and then leave it on your side with your dust colour mixed in, it will harden again and then you can't use it. So if you can keep a flame under it, some people put a plate on top of a candle, but oil burners are absolutely perfect. Just don't use them for wax melts as well as edible things. So I've painted his whole face with white. So I've used the cocoa butter for that because I wanted that to have the texture, so when that dries it's going to have this sheen across it, and then I've went back with just dust. So this is not mixed with the cocoa butter, this is just that really deep purple on his eyes. It's just dry dust that I've brushed all around his eyes, and then I'm just dusting some shadows around the rest of his face as well. So I've got the areas behind his nostrils, under his chin, on his forehead, that sort of thing. And then I've gone back now with the moss green again, and I'm trying to copy the image and dab on the green where you can see those marks on his head. I think it actually is supposed to look like moss, like Beetlejuice actually has moss on his head. So this colour worked perfect. So I'm dabbing that on, and I can use my fingers and stuff as well, because the cocoa butter, like I say, it sort of creates an almost like an outer shell, and then because Beetlejuice's face is so gross, it's got lots of lines and marks and moss and dirt and everything. Like, you don't need to be precious with it, you don't need to worry about making marks in it. The more marks the better, to be perfectly honest. So this is where it really starts to come to life. The more colour that you put in, the more sort of realistic it looks. I don't think this one did look loads like Beetlejuice in the end, but I just really liked how it turned out. It was more like a painting than it was a cake. So as I said earlier, the hairlines that I spent the time putting in around the board, I decided were useless and didn't fit in with what I was doing, so I totally took them off. But I did put loads of hairlines on the fondant that was covering the cake, and then I dusted the whole lot of the hair with the moss green. Another quick tip for you is, if you've got dust on your cake board, an excess piece of paste is really good to clean that off, because it just absorbs the dust and you can wipe it off, and it's actually easier than using like a piece of paper towel. So I'm just adding some more colours to the hair here, and it adds a little bit more dimension. I've got another big chunk of paste, and it's just been dyed that green colour and added to the middle part using my template to see where that was, and that's sort of like the front part of his hairline. So I've added that, giving it more depth, and then I'm going back with darker shades and putting in shadows on his hair. Now he needs some stubble, so I'm using a brand new toothbrush. Again, can't be using this for your teeth, but I've just dipped that in my black edible dust, and I'm just dabbing it all over his sort of beard area to make it look like stubble. And then I'm going over the jacket piece, like I said earlier, with that burgundy edible dust colour, and just brushing it all over to really deepen the colour of the jacket. Like I say, I think that added a bit of texture as well, so it looks almost velvety. So now what I'm doing is making the hands that are going to be holding that ticket over his mouth. So I've just got some rose beige coloured modelling paste, and this is like the roughest hand you'll ever see in your life. The point is just to look like it's holding the ticket, so it doesn't need to be crazy realistic, but I've just sort of put it in the general shape of how the fingers would be if they were holding a ticket, and then I've just cut out 4 marks for the fingers, and I'm trying to copy the image, so on one side the fingers are sort of going shorter because of the angle that they're sitting at, and the other side it's holding it at a more straight on angle, so the fingers would look more like like your own hand. To make nails, I use my Dresden tool and I just lightly press in and do the shape of a nail, and then you can push under that to make it look like the nail is protruding. But like I said, I didn't want to go crazy detailed with these, I just wanted it to look like the hands were coming out of the board and holding the ticket. So I put them on the board and just hold them in place for now and see how I feel about them later. And now I'm making the bow tie. So I'm cutting a sort of oval shape, and then I can fold that over on itself and push it into a point in the middle. I'll do that twice, and then I will sort of squeeze them together and place them on the cake, and then take a little strip and place that down the middle to be the sort of centrepiece of the bow tie, and I can put some creases in there as well. I also chose to put some little pieces of paste inside the bow tie to hold it open so it didn't flatten while it was firming. And the Dresden tool is perfect for just adding in some little crease lines in the centre and on the sides of the bow tie. And then for Beetlejuice's big ticket, it's just an edible print. I've put that over his mouth and I've put some paste underneath on each side so that it doesn't flop down, and it looks like the hands are holding it over the face just like the image. I brushed a little bit of my kitty nose pink colour on the whites of the eyes to make it look a little bit more bloodshot. I added the highlights in the eyes and I thought I was done. I thought, yep, that's it, all done, and I started taking some cool videos and pictures and thought, yep, that's me all done. And then I started looking at the cake in comparison to the image that I was using, and I was not happy. The face looked completely too wide and it didn't look like Beetlejuice. So I need to have a little bit of a think. How can I fix this and make it look a little bit more like the picture? He needs a bit of a facelift. So I'm kicking myself as always because I worked on it a little bit off camera and now it looks different to how you just seen it. But basically what I did was I used my hand on the right side as you look at the screen to really firmly press down on his hair and the side of his face, and that effectively gives the look of more face on the right hand side as if his face is turned towards the left. I then added shadow on the right hand side and the light on the left hand side. I also wanted to change the way the eyes look, so that was me using a cotton bud with a little water on it to remove the highlights, because I wanted to put a little bit more light coming from the one direction in the irises, and then I'll put the highlights back in when I'm finished. I made the hair look more hair-like by using scissors to snip at the ends of the hair and make it look like it's standing up as opposed to rounded back. And then I did some work on his makeup. Now, we all know how much makeup can totally change the look of a face, so his purple eyeshadow was far too big on the one side, that had to be made smaller, so I removed some of that with water. I added the yellow light shining on his face using a fluffy brush and the colour Sunset Yellow, all on the left hand side of his face, just checking on the image to see where it's actually hitting, and I've got that all on the left outsides of the face, in the hair, on the left side of the bridge of the nose, and at the bottom part of the chin there as well. I found in the image there was more texture on the right side of his face, so I balled up some tin foil and pressed that into the cake to give little dents and wrinkles on that side. And then I basically re-outlined the whole face with the white, so anything that's white is sort of like the part that's most proud. There's no shadow, there's no light on it, it's the central part. So anywhere that I painted the white was where I was sort of setting the shape of the face. And then when I add the darker colour on the right hand side, it makes the face look more narrow. It's basically contouring. I'm adding those little moss marks on his head again, just by holding the bristles of my brush close together and adding lots of that moss green colour on those areas. And then I'm just going round the outline of the face against the hair with a really dark brown, and that's giving the shadow, and it's really creating the illusion of where the face stops, and when I bring that up it should narrow out a little bit. I spent a little bit longer adding more shadow because I just really enjoyed this part, and then I moved on to the eyes. I decided I wanted to put a lot more detail, so I put some pink paste on the underside of the eyelids. I dusted the front parts of these purple, and then I left the inside parts pink, like the inside of your eyeball. And then I had another idea about adding depth and dimension, so I thought if I cut a little bit away from behind his ear, then I'll be able to push that part further back as well. So I added some hair in front of the ear, like over the top of it, because that matches the picture as well. And then I put really dark brown behind the ear there, just to give more dimension, and I used that same dark brown to dirty up the fingers. I then went back and added a little bit more paste here and there, and added hairlines just to give it a little bit more movement and make it a little bit more interesting. And then I went over the right side of the hair where I can see in the picture that it's most green with this really vivid green glow in the dark dust. Just absolutely perfect for Beetlejuice hair. The only problem being that this is no longer classed as an edible dust. This is made by a company called Rolcom, and if you look it up you can see how it all works. You use a black light on it and it glows in the dark, but even without the black light you can see how vivid that colour is. So after I was done that, I went back with some finishing touches. I did the highlights in the eyes, and I did some little white really super fine lines on where the eyebrows would be to give the illusion of hair underneath the makeup that he's added. And that's pretty much it. I did go over and over again and again with more dust and just keep adding to the colour and the depth because I just really enjoyed the process. And I really wanted it to match the picture, but nothing's ever 100% perfect. Let me know what you think. How much do you think it resembles the picture that I was using? If you've got any tips or suggestions, then feel free to let me know. But we've got a face cake based on Beetlejuice. Do you think you could make a face cake like this? Let me know. So this is how it ended up, all cleaned up and finished. Finally put the dust brushes down. And this is what it looks like under the black light. That green dust looks absolutely amazing when you shine the light on it. It's proper Halloween vibes. I'll definitely need to look into whether we can get some more colours for a Halloween themed cake for next month. So if that's something that you're interested in seeing, then please make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you get a notification when I make a new video. And just watch some of my other videos. And thank you so much for watching. Have you subscribed yet? I can see. I'm watching.